It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign. Just listen if you're...
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another week's Tuesday segment of the MSD on 117.8. I hope everyone is doing well and that you've had an amazing weekend. And I can't wait to get this week started together with everyone here on the MSD. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So with that, how's everyone doing? How was your weekend and how was your Sunday together with the Lord? As time goes by for me on Sundays, I'm trying to get better at like having a proper setup to observe service, right? Because at the core, like I'm sitting there and I'm like listening to the word, and I'm trying my best to have like a nice setup for service, right? But currently, like I'm in my apartment, and I will say that compared to like when I went to school in undergrad, I have gotten like a lot more stuff, right? Like, I'm trying to live like a human being, right? Not just like a homeless person. So I have more stuff, but I think one thing is like being a guy, you still don't get like all of the superfluous things. Like I don't have like a lot of decorations. I have like some minimal decoration and stuff, but it's not like like when I'm at home, all the things that my mom would get, like I don't have stuff like that. And so, like I realized this when I went to visit the members from Atlanta when they were coming to come to Disney World and Universal. That like even though they're in a temporary place, like they were like moving the chairs around and like thinking about where's the best setup. They were asking us like where you want to sit for service and stuff like that. So even in this temporary place, they were trying to offer service in like this great way, right? And so I was like, wow, like I was very moved by that. And so that made me think like, okay, like even though I'm by myself and I'm here, I should still try to offer service at the highest level. Right. And and I think that just stands to reason, but seeing them do it in reality really made me think more about that. And so, I'm curious, right? Like, and I want to know like how everyone's Sundays were and what kind of things that maybe you think that I should, put and prepare. Maybe I should post my setup. It's very nothing. Like there's nothing really there. I'm trying to to do the best with what's available. But anything that I can do to make service better and higher level, if you guys have ideas, I would love to hear them. But yeah, so how was everyone's weekends? This is the first weekend where I haven't gone down to Orlando, right? Which is where like all of the big amusement parks, in Florida is. And so I think because of that, I was a lot less tired. And of course, the past few weeks have been great, but this was really a catch-up weekend for me, right? Like I think like law school is a place where you can't take time off even slightly. like like you have to use like the most of your time, and I'm grateful for that because I think it's kind of showing me like through life and through the things of our faith and the spiritual aspects that of how we have to use our time valuably. Of course, it's not to say that you can't do other things that you enjoy, but it's like they design it so that, oh, okay, if you've been lazy or if you haven't been doing the work, then you will fall quickly behind and it'll be like a lot of work to catch up. And so it was kind of a catch up weekend for me, and I was trying to do everything that I could. And so even right now, like I think this is probably officially the latest that I've recorded the MSD. And I apologize for that. But yeah, so I was up really late until Sunday, and right now it's actually Monday morning after pre-dawn for me. And yeah, I haven't recorded at like this time before. So it's interesting to be able to do this. And even though like I think the last few times because I was doing it at the end of the night, like late in the night, like 2 a.m. or something like that, I really felt it. But this time around, even though I think I slept about the same as I usually do, but waking up, observing the pre-dawn, and being able to record this afterwards, I feel a little bit more energized. And also, like I have been trying to exercise more as of late too. And so yesterday, I exercised a bit, and it wasn't like a lot or anything, but even that small difference, I feel like it made a big impact, right? Like even like as I was studying and doing other things, it was a bit easier. So I really see the value of exercise. And I think that's something that you only see when you do it and try it and practice. So with that, let's go directly into today's recording. As we have had for the last few weeks, we will be having Bible today and 2G Talks with Rachel from Houston. I'm really grateful both to Rachel for all the work that she has put into 2G Talks, but also like, I'm very grateful for everyone's support. Both of Rachel and of this Tuesday segment in particular. I'm really happy to read everyone's comments and just to know that people are listening, right? And I can't wait to meet more people and meet all of you guys going forward. I know Pastor Sky posts like all of these like countries like that are visiting Warmingdong, right? And like he's able to spend time with them. And I think that's like so amazing too. So, who knows how long Pastor Sky will be based, in Korea, right? But at least for this time being, in this current chapter, of his life and of his mission, to be able to see all of them and for us to see you guys vicariously through Pastor Sky, I think it is so amazing too. And so, I'm so even though like some of the people that he posts, like I may not know them, it's exciting to see, right? And I'm very encouraged to see that, and I can't wait to be able to meet all of those people and meet you guys in person as well going forward. And so, yeah, like I think it's as the world becomes increasingly more digital, even within Providence, I think it'll be really amazing. And so with that too, I guess this wasn't one of the topics that I was gonna talk about, but and I actually don't know if if I can openly discuss this, but I don't think there's a bad thing to this. But one of the things that we've been trying to do here in AP is we're trying to see as leaders what are different kinds of maybe problem areas that we can address. And so like we have had like different groups separate and work on like various different projects to address something within American Providence. And so interestingly enough, like one of the things that our group came up with was to have a social media account, right? And I don't think this is new by any measure, right? And maybe many churches do have that, but you can kind of think of the common hiccups and challenges that people face to social media. And I think people have done things with social media for Providence like before, right? Like whether it's Facebook or Instagram or some other platform. But this is something that we came up with there. So one of the problems is consistency, right? Like how often are we posting and what are we posting? It's not very clear. And I think before, like we kind of did it very like gratuitously. Like I don't know if that's the right description, but just like we just did it for the sake of doing it. And I don't think that those kind of measures really last unless there's kind of like something consistent that you can post and do and a way to keep improving on, right? Like if you're only doing it for the sake of doing it, like I don't think you're like looking for improvements all the time necessarily. Right? I think there has to be a component of like desire and want to do it. So anyways, like one of the things that came up was like, okay, so let's maybe make an Instagram account, right? And so, this could be for all of American Providence. Maybe it'll just be for like the people in the group and for maybe the guys in Providence. But one of the things that we have been seeing is that at least Providence, because like of all the social media platforms, almost everyone is active on Instagram, and like people post their own things. And the thing that we see is that people do post the things of their faith on Instagram, right? And this goes not just for Providence, but also for Christians and other people, right? Like in the world too. And there are a lot of like Christian accounts and things like that too. So we want to like maybe make one for Providence, and for American Providence, and post the things that members do in their individual life of faith and throughout their day. And there's different kinds of ideas, like of what kind of content to post and how to do it and stuff too. And so I'm curious to know, like, if you guys have any suggestions for kind of content that we can post regularly, or like specific content that you would like to see, right? Like as we mentioned, right? Like if you follow Pastor Sky or other members, you kind of see the kind of things that they get to do, right? And I'm sure that those glimpses into their lives, as it has to do with faith, is like really substantial, right? Like for me, compared to seeing posts from like people in the world and from my friends who post like whatever like parts of their life and oftentimes like fabricated parts of their life, seeing the authentic parts of people's faith on Instagram, and definitely footage of people going to like Warmyeongdong or doing things within their churches or doing things with members or doing things like Providence related, is like so fun and so rewarding, and it makes me feel like, I wish I could be there, or oh, I wish I can see that person in real life, and things of that nature, right? And I think we even feel that, right, as we listen to the MSD and hear the various stories and see what we get up to. I saw someone mentioning that they wish that they had been there to at Disney World as well. And I'm sure in the future we'll get the chance, right? That members will be able to go together and have fun and various different kinds of things. So yeah, so any kind of thoughts that you may have for this um, I mean, we can make it as broad as we want, but then I think sometimes you make things so broad that it kind of disappears into nothingness. And sometimes if we make it too narrow, then it doesn't appeal to everyone, right? So we have to strike a balance, right? So it's going to be for all of Providence, which I don't think necessarily would be the case. I think that would require too much regulation. Is it going to be for all of American Providence? And that too, may have a lot more regulation. But if it's maybe some of the male members, and male members can also repost anything that female members send to them and say like, oh, this would be good that if you guys could share this, we could do that too. But if you have ideas about what we should post, and we haven't yet come up with things like the name for the account, like I think that too, right? It kind of goes back to the broad versus narrow thing. It goes to the professional, and that one's on a scale of like how professional to informal do we want to be? Like, should the tagline really just read, I don't know, like American Providence, or should it be kind of creative, right? Like, but like, how creative can we go before it's so Providence exclusive, that other people won't know like what our Instagram handle even means, right? And so, yeah, like all of these kind of ideas, like if you have suggestions for the name, if you have suggestions for different kinds of content, feel free to let us know in the comments below. Like one of the things I think came up for me that I think people in the world would like too, is if there were someone every day posting a short prayer, right? Like like you could think of like an on Instagram, right? So it has to be relatively short, but a prayer for the world, a prayer for this country, and a prayer for different kinds of things, a prayer for Providence. And I think that'd be very, very encouraging to see, right, for members, right? Like even if you don't listen to it all the time, knowing that there's someone doing that and posting consistently, and if one person were to do this, I think it'd be very difficult. But if this is like a shared account and just there's someone in charge of each day doing this, I think it becomes a lot easier, right? And then there's like certain bigger events that we can post, and stuff. So yeah, like anyways, like all of this kind of stuff like came to mind, right? I know people live and they do amazing things in their individual life of faith, right? Like in their own world, and that is very post-worthy too, right? So like for us, like when we do our own thing, and post it on our personal Instagram, it reaches out to whoever's personally following us, right? But if it's like an account that's more centralized, then hopefully it has an outreach to people who maybe not are not part of that, that your arms reach, right, in a sense. So anyways, yeah, that's one of the ideas. I wasn't really planning on talking about that necessarily, but this is a great place to kind of look for ideas, right, and to pick many people's brains from all across the world. So I wanted to mention that to you guys too. So with that, let's go into the first break for today. I hope that you guys have been enjoying and haven't gotten used to hearing the natural temple opening. For me, it's something that I always enjoy, and I hope that it's a song that we can sing really for the 1,000 years of this history. And like if you think about it, right, like I think this song is really powerful, even for us who are here in these first 50 years of the 1,000 year history. But imagine what it would be like thinking about our descendants, right? Like 900 years down the line, still singing this song and immortalizing the things that something did and immortalizing the things that happened, in the inception of Providence, right? It's like the hymns like written in the Bible, right? And so, but of the hymns, like this would probably be like one of the most important ones, right? It talks about everything, right? It lays it out specifically. So yeah, like just something to chew on as we listen to the song and as we sing along too. So hope everyone enjoyed that, and yes, that you are also off to a great start to your week, right? Like how was everyone's Monday, right? And so I hope that it's really been a week so far of putting the word into practice. Like yeah, for me it's Monday too, but already I'm seeing the word play out too, and so I hope and I want to see how like this week goes, right? Like because it was a very interesting message, right? Like God's responsibility and man's responsibility. And since he talked about a lot of things that I haven't heard him specifically mention in a long time, or like in that specific way, right? Like we've heard him mention these words in various different forms before, but this week was particularly important and new, right? It talked about God's responsibility and man's responsibility. And, it was really interesting, right? Because so God's talked about the wicked before, and since he's talked about the wicked before, but he specifically says that yes, like so this is really, really interesting, right? Like so, yes, even when the wicked people do wicked deeds, God still helps us and he will, use whatever situation that happens like to the ultimate advantage of his people. But it doesn't mean that like what the wicked people did initially was God's will, right? And so I think this is really cool to think about because people in the world, they think that the things that happened in God's providence history so far was like all of God's will, right? Like the mosquitoes biting is God's will, right? Like people crucifying Jesus, right? And so I know in the former time period, like people talk about this a lot, right? That Jesus had to come to die for our sins, right? And ultimately that became true, but he wasn't born to die for our sins, right? And that's something that we know, and that's a truth that we have only here in Providence history, right. And not just to that extent, but knowing the consequences of that and living according to that, right? Like I don't know if there's other people across the world, like some denominations of Christianity who purport that, who believe that, right? Because there's thousands of different denominations, but we're the place that lives according to that and tries to live according to God's will. And of course, we're the complete testament time period, right? The final history, like, and have fulfilled all the things that God has desired. Yes, but I specifically mention it because I see a lot of Christian content online, going back to our conversation about social media, of people like thinking that like God did the things that the wicked people did, right, for his will, for some ultimate purpose. But like even when we look through the story of Joseph throughout this week and throughout the message, God said that no, like he didn't cause like Joseph's brothers to do that wicked deed against Joseph. But like the message specifically said, had they not done that, God would have found a natural way to send Joseph to Egypt to ultimately have done, what he did anyways, right? But it would not have been like through the suffering and the infliction of what the mosquitoes did. And not just that, but his Joseph's brothers suffered too, right? Eventually because of their actions, right? And so they have to go through this process of repentance and of suffering because of what they did. And had they not done that, then maybe they would ultimately had an even better future too, right? Like as we see, like the Israelites grow and become these 12 big tribes, right? That like the tribes, they had issues too, right? And different tribes caused different problems, right? And so you can kind of think about like, oh, had these tribes not been wicked, would there have been a possibility of them like doing even better, right? And subsequently, like when they started to have kings and such, the kings would not go astray, and that people would stick on to God's path. So you start to think about all of these things. But yes, that God doesn't cause them to do wicked deeds. And I think yeah, this part was like just really interesting. And I think like the part that really stuck out, right, like is that, God still helps us even though the wicked and the mosquitoes do these things. And I think that was such a hopeful part. And it's a part that I hope that everyone realizes once again, right? Like I don't know how everyone feels like being in 2024 and being at the place that they're at. I'm sure that there are, there are challenges that people may be facing too, but at the same time that there's also many great things that are happening that have kind of put you, I wouldn't say into like a false sense of security, but have put you at ease, right? From past tumultuous things that have happened in your life or that have happened in Providence. But like when we become lax, and the mosquitoes bite us, then we kind of come to think like, oh, like why is this happening, right? Why, like why God, right? Stuff like that, right? But looking and seeing this word, we know that if we make it to the end, that God will help us, right? But in the process, just as this today's morning message said too, that we do have to destroy Satan, right? We do have to catch the mosquitoes, right? There is a time when judgment comes at the end of the period, and like when the winter comes, the mosquitoes die. But while you're living in the summer, right, because these wicked people do wicked things, you do have to destroy them with prayer and through your actions, right? Like, and so we have to keep doing the work, and we can't quit the work that God is doing through us. And that's something that I really felt too, right? So even like yesterday, I think like Saturday and Sunday, it was all about like doing work to catch up for the things of school. And I think had this been the past and had I not listened to this word, I would look at that work and be like, oh my gosh, like there's so much to do, right? And then like there could be a chance to become lazy and lax and not do the work. But because I know that God helps me and that if I go through the end of this, that I'll truly produce fruit. It was very encouraging, and I didn't feel that uh, it was challenging and that I didn't want to do it. Right, so like uh, right after listening to the message and as I was studying, I realized that it's gonna be a long night, and so even yesterday, I was up until quite late, and it wasn't just the lateness of the night, but just after service and after lunch, I spent like the entire afternoon all the way until the time I slept, like kind of studying, going over the material for class and doing and catching up. And so I realized at some point that it's going to be a really long night, like looking at the things that I had to do. But when I thought that, it made me really glad to have heard the word, right? Like it to go until the end, and that I have to finish it, and that God will be with me, like in the end, right? And so and to leave it to God. And so it's very encouraging. And I think without that word, it'd be difficult to do everything that we need to. But with this word and knowing that God helps us, there was like such a tremendous joy to doing the work in some. Right. And I thought this part was really interesting too, right? Like after talking about Noah's time, like one of the things that the word said was instead of rushing God, rush yourself and right and hurry up in the things that you have to do, right? So like I thought that was so funny and it's so true, right? Because God's time will come, and we know that all the things that God has to do for us will come at the right time. But if we do the work, then God will, like when God's help comes, it'll really happen and take place in a magnificent way. But if we fail to do what we need to do, then it'll be challenging for God to give us everything that we need. And so, yeah, I was really thinking about that, like with respect to like even studying here, right? Like it's been 5 weeks so far, and this is the start to the 6th week. And even as I was starting to study, like that really made me think, like, wow, like already it feels like the building of the ambition masterpiece, building it 5 times, 6 times until completion, right? Because when we first start to study, right, and it's a new subject, we don't know it implicitly right away, right? Like, I think maybe some subjects are easier than others, but if you've never done like legal studying and you're starting it for the first time, like reading these legal briefs and learning this legal language, it was quite tricky and challenging. And so at first it was hard to know exactly how to study properly. And I'm sure Pastor Sky feels that way somewhat about his mission, and I'm sure everyone also feels like that, like with their respective situations. Anything new that you try, like whether it's a new mission, a new job, a new education, a new part of their life, right? It's tricky figuring it out from the beginning, right? But as this week's message said, right, it's part of our responsibilities, and when we do it, we see that things turn out for the best and for the better, and that God truly helps us along the journey. And so, right, like thinking about that, I think the parable of the ambition masterpiece, it just becomes more and more like relevant and more powerful over time. And so I think it's something to really note for the world, right? Like, and I think it only works as a parable because it was actually built, right? It's not just some theoretical thing, but we have this literally this embodiment of the word and the embodiment of God's ambition, like made with these tremendous rocks, right? Because I think growing up and prior to like all of the word in the recent few years about Warmingdong and about the ambition masterpiece, I wasn't really thinking about that. But like now looking at it, it's like, wow, like this is crazy, right? This is what God has planned for us, like as long as we continue to do what we must do. And so like related to that, yeah, there's a couple of other things too. And this kind of relates more to last week. But I think it does relate to doing our responsibilities. So I guess that was partially mentioned in this week's message too, how we do have to do our responsibility and that God only helps us if we like, take action, right? But last week I really realized that God does help us, and also that that like sometimes if we don't do our responsibility, then we do face the consequences, and that we do face punishment to some degree too. But that God quickly helps us when we do the right thing. Right, so I won't share like all the details of everything that happened, but there's like a lot of guys here, right, who I would want to evangelize, and some guys that I don't necessarily want to. But it's not that like I like have anything against them in particular. And I don't know if it's the right thing, but like that's something that I have to continue to discern, like whether this person is someone who God has prepared, and just because they have certain characteristics that I don't necessarily think would be helpful in providence doesn't mean that God sees something in their heart, right, that I can't see, right? But anyways, like there's a guy like in my neighborhood who goes to the law school as well. And because we're so close to the law school, there's quite a few of the students from the school who live here. And so sometimes I see him and we hang out from time to time. But this guy is also a Korean guy. And so I think for him, he wants to be like pretty close. And at first, like when I was first meeting him, like I was kind of wary, right? Because he's Korean, and I was like, oh, okay, like I don't know if I like have him over if he like has like heard any of the slander, and if there's gonna be kind of an issue there too. And also just in general, like for me, like I firmly believe that God brought me here to American Providence for a reason. And I don't want to just evangelize Korean people, but that's also not to say that we shouldn't evangelize Korean people at all. But like so this guy wasn't really on my radar. And so there's sometimes when I think about him and I'm like, like, do I take care of him nonetheless? Like, do I, put in the effort to, I don't know, to manage him or to help out? Because he's also, he is an international student. And so I do see how challenging it must be for him to be so far from home. And he's also a really skinny guy, and he doesn't look like he eats that well, that he's taking care of himself. So, of course, like I've already like taken care of him before, and also when my mom was here, even she took care of him to some degree too. But like sometimes you wonder, like, oh, like how much is too much, right? To extend to someone who may not. It's not about reciprocating in kind, but may not bear fruit in the end. And so one of the things that I was thinking of that I wasn't doing earlier last week was maybe thinking about him. So I was kind of hesitating to like check in on him and to see how he's doing. And so as soon as I hesitated, but of course this wasn't the only thing that I did. There was something else, but I won't share what that is. But as soon as that I hesitated and we did this thing, I was like outside, like swimming in the pool, like in front of my apartment to exercise. And when I got out and I was like walking to the shower, I stepped on this like really sharp rock and it cut into my foot. And so it was like bleeding and I really hope that it didn't get like a part of it didn't get stuck in there. I don't think it did. I think it's just a blister, but yeah, there's like a blister that formed like after doing that. And so yeah, that happened as soon as in my heart I wasn't doing what was right, and I like, I think if I were younger I'd be like really angry and upset, right? But as soon as it happened, I was like, okay, I'm not doing the right thing. I should fix this thing, right? I should not be doing what I'm doing. And so I was like thankful for it, like to some degree. I was like, okay, I'm glad that the consequence happened like almost immediately, telling me to fix it. And so like part of the things I did was after that I was like, okay, like I prayed to God. I was like, God, like I don't know whether this person is gonna come to Providence or not. Like of all of the people that I've met here so far, like it's not that I necessarily believe that I'm gonna evangelize this person, but still, because I don't know what your will is, and as this week's message said, right, even a small sapling that is raised for a long time will become fruitful, right? Will become a fruitful tree. So I have no idea, right, who you'd use and what you may do. And so, okay, I was like, okay, let me just go take care of this person too. And so, as I mentioned, he's like a really skinny guy, but he looks like unhealthy skinny, right? Like he's really like there's nothing to his bones. And so I have like a lot of food left over, as I mentioned, like from visiting the members over the last few weeks. And so like I prepared like some things and I went over and I took it over to his apartment and I dropped it off. And so like he was very grateful for that. But the crazy thing was, as soon as like I did that, like I told him, yeah, like I was swimming earlier because I had invited him to come swimming if he'd like to. And I said, yeah, like I stepped on this rock and it's like cut in pretty deep. And like he saw it and he was like, oh, dude, that's pretty deep. And the crazy thing was, as soon as I showed it to him, he was like, hey, like use this. And he pulled out this thing called povidone iodine, right? Like, uh, yeah, povidone. I think it's povidone iodine. Like, I don't know if you guys know what that is. Like Korean people use it a lot, but I haven't seen it in the U.S. a lot. Like, I guess it's a kind of iodine, but it's like very dark. It's like a brown. It's like a very dark brown color. But it pretty much use it for like cuts and stuff, like to prevent infection. It's quite common in Korea, but I don't think it's as common in the US. And he literally had brought it with him from Korea, right? And so it's something that I've used before, but it's not something that I would like buy too regularly here. And so like as soon as I took action and helped this person, and for the purposes of managing him on God's behalf, God provided really, really like the balm, right? The salve to heal me and to take care of like the cut on my foot and the kind of the pain that I was going through. And so I really want to show that yes, like when we take action on the various things that we need to, then God provides that help, and it was very encouraging to be able to see that. So it's a very small thing, but we see it happen in practice, and of course, even more happens when we take care of lives and when we take care of members. But I really was very encouraged to see that, and I think it gave me a lot of strength for this week. Of course, it's just Monday, but yeah, all of this week, right? Like. Like for me, yeah, as I may have shared in the last few weeks, it's very front loaded. So Sunday to Wednesday, I'm like swamped, and so I know that even today will be busy too, and there may be a lot of challenges with that too. But I really believe that God will lead this entire time, and that if I make it through this week, and not just through this week, but like for the semester, that things will constantly get better over time. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for Bible today. I'm really thankful for everyone for listening, and I can't wait to see what happens in your guys' week. So throughout the week, like if you feel like, this is something that happened as a consequence of the word, feel free to comment and let us know down below, right? So you don't have to necessarily comment just on Tuesday. But yeah, like throughout the week, like if there's like a callback to this, I would love to hear what you have to do. So with that, it's quite kind of a bit shorter of an episode today. But we will get into the second break, and then we will pass it off to Rachel from Houston with 2G Talks.
Hear their words, what they observe. Look at his life, he is happy for sure. Yes, that is right. I know I live the most happy life. Happiness should never fade, it should last eternally. That is joy. People can say what they want about me. Their thoughts are wrong. They don't know, they don't understand. Although this path may be hard, I will take this glorious path, the path of life. Holy Spirit and Son, really happy, right? They agree, yes, you are happy indeed. Happiness should never fade, it should last eternally. That is joy. Happiness should never fade, it should last eternally. That is joy. Holy Spirit and Son, I'm really happy, right? They agree, yes, you are happy indeed. They agree, yes, you are happy indeed.
Welcome back, everyone, and a happy Tuesday to you. Hope you had a great weekend and start to your week. Can you believe that we're already at the end of the month? I mean, technically, we only have 3 months until the start of 2025. I can't believe how quickly time passes by. Recently for myself this week, I've been really working on my prayer. And one of my prayers that I've been having this week is praying to value and appreciate time more. As a teacher, it really does seem like I never have enough time. There's always something that I have to do, emails, something that I need to get done, tutorials, makeup test, retest, requizzes. There's just never enough time in the week. And so a lot of the times, it's really overwhelming every single day. But there was something that Sansanam shared to us all during the Sunday message. And I hope you all had an amazing time listening to the Sunday message for this week. I believe the title of this week's Sunday message was God and Man's Responsibility. And the key thing that I really wanted to focus on or quickly talk about was this one line that Sansanam said. He talked about how God is time. And so if we lose time, then we actually lose God. Some said that we couldn't even begin to repay God for allowing us to live on the earth. And how Sansanam said it too was just so profound and poetic. He said that we'd never be able to repay God for the gravity that we use. The sun, the air, the moon, everything around us, all of that was created and given to us by God. The only way to repay God's great love is by living well together with Him. I don't know, I just find that to be so romantic. All God really wants is for us to live together with Him and fulfill the purpose of creation. So I hope that we can all live together with the Holy Trinity and, of course, remember all the stories that we have with them. For we all know the saying, you should all know it by now, if you forget, you die. So let's never forget. But in the case that maybe you forgot the topic of last week, my stories, that's okay, because I can remind you. Last week, I began to share about my mother's story on how she came to this history. So just a short recap. Last week, we paused her story on a cliffhanger. So to set the stage again, my mother was a senior in high school and had just received a marriage proposal from her father's 30-year-old colleague. In protest, my mother demanded she be allowed to work so as to pay for herself and eventually go to college. The job in question was that she had wanted to become a firefighter. After much deliberation, my grandfather had allowed her to go to the firefighter training. And of course, again, this was in hopes of tricking her and eventually to teach her a lesson. My cliffhanger was whether or not my mother had made the cut and was able to become a firefighter. So what do you think? Do you think she made it? Do you think she was able to become a firefighter or not? This is your last chance to make your guess. And I mean, if you don't know anything about firefighter training, it's really brutal and intense. And here I'm going to list a couple of things that actually firefighters have to be able to do. And maybe this can help you come up with your hypothesis or what you think my mother was able to do, if she was able to become a firefighter or not. So here are some of the requirements that they have to be able to do. You have to be able to carry someone twice your size with all of your gear. You have to be able to carry about a 70 to 50 pound, or in kilograms, because I did look it up for you guys, you have to be able to carry a 23 to 32 kilogram fire hose. You also have to be able to do this while extinguishing hot wildfires, conducting CPR, and you have to know how to conduct car rescues using the jaws of life, etc. My grandfather, he knew all of this about firefighters, of course. So his hypothesis, or his guess, was that he thought there was simply no way for my mother, his puny little daughter, to be able to handle it and become a firefighter. So, as she was gone during her weeks of training, he waited patiently for the day when she would come back home. After weeks of training, the day finally came. My grandfather was ready. As soon as he saw my mother limp across the yard with her face downcast, he immediately went out to meet her and give her his condolences on failing. He was going to be such a gracious parent and tell her that everything would be all right. And so he reached his arms out toward my mother, who now had tears pouring down her face. My mother, too, reached out towards him, but then immediately pulled out her acceptance letter to the fire station. She was now a firefighter. Her tears had actually been tears of joy and pain. She could not contain the overwhelming emotions of success. She had proved her father wrong, was going to be able to support herself and go to college, and ultimately be free. As soon as my grandfather saw her acceptance letter, he immediately began to yell and chase down his brothers, which, if you recall, were the ones that convinced my grandfather that he should let my mother go. No one in the house could understand how my mother possibly was able to succeed and pass the physically demanding task. And maybe you, too, were somebody that didn't think my mother would make it. But what they didn't know was that after hearing my mother's story, the firefighters at the station had been inspired and were determined to help her succeed. They had taught her many different tricks and tips on ways to hold herself while carrying more and more weight, different ways that she could carry people, and how to breathe to increase endurance, amongst many other things. Truly, God and the Holy Spirit were with her and allowed her to pass her many tests with flying colors. Now, as a firefighter, she was able to pay her way through college. Once she was in college, she eventually became connected to the Bible studies. She began learning in 1993, but actually didn't pass until 1994. Her first lecturer was none other than The Voice, PJ. Now, it should be okay to mention this, but at first, her and PJ actually didn't have the greatest relationship. Since my mother had been searching for the truth for so long, she was very well versed in the Bible. She could flip through scriptures and would debate using the Bible. Oftentimes, her Bible studies with PJ would devolve into scripture sparring matches. He would say one thing, and immediately she would have a scripture ready to deny it. This was how diligent she was with the Bible, how earnestly she was waiting for Jesus to come back. She would not be led by falsehood or be led by an antichrist. She knew that she had to find Jesus. So through their constant bickering, eventually, PJ and other lecturers refused to teach her anymore. And I'm going to quote this, and I quote, claimed that Mel, my mother, would be the last person to ever come to Providence. And yet, Jesus would come. He would come to the lecturers, he would go to my mother's managers, even to my own mother, he'd go to them through their dreams and encourage all of them to keep on going. And so because of this, my mother continued to learn. Eventually, she was connected to one lecturer who was able to push past her hard theological nature. Instead, he focused on testifying about the core of providence. And so he taught her about God's love. Through this, her cold exterior thawed, and she could no longer deny the truth being preached to her. It was at this time in 1994 when she had her completion ceremony and began diligently running her life of faith, evangelizing and lecturing. She even dropped out of college to ensure that she could run for Providence full time. Since then, she has evangelized about 20 people, working even now to lecture many lives here in America and internationally. And of course, not to worry, even to this day, PJ and her remain very good friends. While growing in Providence, my mother even visited Sansanim on many occasions in Korea, and even when he traveled to America. She's also had many spiritual experiences and instances that maybe I'll have time or maybe I'll share in the future. Overall, my mother has remained a strong foundation in Providence for about 30 years. As a person in general, aside from being my mother, I really do appreciate her. I always like to tell people that my mom is like my best friend. Except when I do something bad, then she is, of course, my mother. I'm very grateful to the Holy Spirit for giving her to me as my mom. And it's a little embarrassing, but I did tell her that she couldn't listen to my podcast. But maybe in the future, if she does, or if she is listening to it now, then I wanted to tell you, Mom, I love you. And yes, Mom, thank you so much for raising me. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my mother's story. I hope you all enjoyed it. I also hope that it gives you some more insight into who I am as a person and where I have come from. Of course, though, that is only half of who I am. There is my father's side of the story. But to be completely frank and honest, I don't really know much about my father's past. As I mentioned, I am a second gen. Both of my parents were matched in January of 1999 and blessed officially in April of that same year. A cool side note I always like to mention is that this was the time when Sansanim was still out, and so they even had Sansanim at their matching. Anyways, due to many different instances and things, my father actually stopped believing in the faith in 2009. He officially divorced my mother, and left Providence in 2012. Because of this, much of my father's past is lost on me. The things that I do know come from my mother. I do know that he was evangelized a few years before my mother. He actively worked together with Sunsanim, building the Ambition masterpiece. We do have photos of him doing it. He even learned Korea while he lived over there for a bit. Whenever he came back to America, he actually pioneered Boston and was the active head leader at the time. Once he became blessed with my mother, they received Sunsanim's instruction and approval to then come to Houston. Together, they pioneered the church here. Sunsanim had personally appointed them with missions. Sunsanim had told my father to become the head leader and take care of the members, while my mother was appointed as the head evangelist, who would bring more and more lives to this history. Together with the members, they raised the church. I was born in March of 2000, and my younger brother was born in July of 2001. So let's imagine, just for a second. You're a young man recently married to someone that you don't really know. You moved to a completely new state, a new part of the country, with no family. You've just started working full-time at a new company. You're also the head leader of a pioneering church. And you have 2 newborn babies. This, coupled with the time of the grave period, eventually led to my father's fate. Of course, I know my father had many shortcomings. In the Sunday message, Sunsanim even detailed the different reasons that people leave this history. And he explicitly stated that there was 5 different things that caused people to leave. The first one is that they prayed asking God to help them, but then when God did not help them, they felt ignored. The second being that people leave because they couldn't endure their suffering. The third was many leave because they thought that they had to endure something, but because it came too much, they did not realize that they actually should have fought back. The fourth was that people became tested by others, and the fifth was that people fail to do their responsibilities. And so they become lazy, and instead they take the easy way out. So amongst these 5 different reasons that people leave Providence, I don't know exactly what my father's may have been, but I do acknowledge this about him, that he had shortcomings. Even so, I can't help but have empathy for him, because he's a part of me. Granted, this part of me is definitely quite rocky. There are days that I wish I knew what he was like before I was born. I mean, I've heard stories. We even have old mini cassette tapes in my house of him preaching Bible study to newcomers. We even have some cassette tapes of PJ, the voice, which is super old school, right? You know, although I didn't know much about him and I don't know much about his past, I have been told that I am very similar to what he was like back then. The way that we think, how we work, our organizational process. Sometimes even now he'll say things during our monthly dinners and I can't help but laugh because it really is like looking into a mirror. We're just very different people. The path we've chosen is very different. And it is hard sometimes. You know, the messages talk about what can happen to people who leave, what their fate will be, and it's painful. But I do find solace in the fact that my father isn't someone who has ever persecuted, and he isn't someone who has ever blocked me from this history. He loves me very much. We have come to an understanding, and for that I'm really grateful. We respect each other's decisions, and in the end, the only thing that really matters is that we still love each other, and we only want the best for each other. And I do like to think that that's a good condition for him. In the end, I've come to realize that righteous people will do righteous deeds, and wicked people will do wicked things. But even so, it's funny because God's love shines on everyone. Just like how the sun shines over the whole earth, the good and the bad. Because of my parents, my mother and my father, in their own ways, through their lives, I've been able to come and realize about God. And I've come to realize that no matter what, God's will is fulfilled. At the end of the day, this is really just God's world. His path and His will are always one. So I wanted to share the stories of my mother because hers are very inspiring, but also I wanted to share my father just a little bit because especially when going through difficulties, maybe your family is persecuting you, or maybe your greatest struggle is that your parents aren't in Providence. I just wanted to remind everyone that no matter what, as long as you stay together with God, as long as we're by His side, because we are His brides, He will always take care of us. And He's going to take care of our families too. I've seen this in my own life too. Even though my father, he's so stubborn and he doesn't believe, and he doesn't think that God does things for him, I know that it's always God. God always wins because we received the victory. And maybe one day, my father and your family will come to their senses too. So don't lose hope. If you promise not to lose hope, then I won't either, okay? Bye, teen, yeah? So with that, I'll wrap up 2G Talks. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And let's chat next week too, yeah?
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know. I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive.